We tend to see crime as something totally bad. It's breaking rules, disrupting social order and damaging lives.
There were 4 blocks with a mask on them. They kept my wife as a hostage with the knife point, and 2 blocks came in the post office and they knocked me down. They started punching me and I was bleeding that time.
The Commonsense view is that social order and crime are opposites and that crime's a threat to social order. But 100 years ago, in a very controversial analysis, French sociologist Émile Durkheim gave us a rather different view.
Well, Durkheim didn't say crime was okay, but he did say that in modern societies, which are full of obvious inequalities and injustices, you must expect a certain level of crime. It's normal. And the second thing he said, that the crime and order, rather than being opposites, are actually linked. And in some ways, crime can actually be functional for social order.
So how does this happen? Well, Durkheim argued that when we identify criminals and punish them, something else is happening too. A process of moral instruction is taking place.
Well, a judge or a magistrate won't just say you've been found guilty, you're going to prison. They'll put it in a moral context. They'll say something like you've been found guilty of this terrible crime, you're not fit to be around decent law-abiding people, I'm going to send you to prison for 5 years. And this will be a warning to other people who are thinking of doing the same thing. So courts are institutions of morality as well as law.
At one time, punishments were public, and this was to show people this is what happens if you break the law. And people were flogged or hanged in front of cheering crowds. We don't have public punishments today, but we have the mass media for our moral instruction. Durkheim saw this instructive aspect of crime and punishment as functional for social order in 3 important ways. Firstly, crime and punishment can help to reaffirm and clarify social boundaries.
Well, imagine there's a problem with texting in your class. The kids are on the phone all the time, the teacher can't teach them. So she finally snaps, she said enough, so she says, next person to text in my class, I'm taking their phone. So a kid texts and the teacher takes the phone. What's happened here is a boundary has been clarified and reinforced, and the other kids at least know what the score is. Well, it can sometimes work this way with crime and punishment, and a good example of this would be the introduction of zero-tolerance policing in New York.
In the 1980s, crime was out of control in parts of New York. So in the early 1990s, the head of New York Transit Police, William Bratton, introduced a system of zero-tolerance policing. Whereas the police had been turning a blind eye to minor crimes such as drunkenness, dope smoking or fare dodging, people were now arrested for these crimes. So the warning was clear: don't commit any crimes. And suddenly, crime rates, for serious as well as minor offences, fell dramatically.
Well, the extent to which the fall in crime was due to zero-tolerance policing is open to debate. But from a Durkheimian point of view, punishing people for these relatively small crimes and the reporting of this in the media was an affirmation of social boundaries. People were being told, you've been getting away with these crimes for a long time, but not any longer. The rule is being reinforced.
So people breaking the rules and being punished can help to clarify and reaffirm social boundaries. But sometimes the functions of crime can work in more or less the opposite direction. And here, Durkheim argued that a second function of crime can be to help bring about social change.
Well, societies are constantly changing and rules and values and attitudes are changing, but the law's written down, and sometimes some laws can seem a bit dated and a bit unfair and a bit unjust. Now, from a Durkheimian point of view, these sorts of crimes and punishing these sorts of crimes can sometimes act as a stimulus for social reform. And a good contemporary example of this will be the debate about euthanasia and assisted suicide.
Euthanasia is helping someone to die to end their suffering. Assisted suicide is helping someone to end their own life. Both are still illegal in the UK and most other countries, and doctors or relatives who actively terminate the lives of suffering patients or relatives can be charged with murder and manslaughter.
Well, it seems this law may be out of touch with public opinion because surveys have shown that in this country and in other countries, a majority of people feel that under certain circumstances, euthanasia and assisted suicide shouldn't be illegal. And when these cases come to court, there's a great deal of public debate, and even the courts themselves, the judges, have become increasingly reluctant to impose custodial sentences for these crimes.
And each time a mercy-killing case is brought to court and reported in the media, it fuels the debate about legalising euthanasia. And sometimes advocates of law reform will deliberately and publicly break the law to generate this type of reaction. An example is Dr. Jack Kevorkian, known as Dr. Death, a long-time campaigner for legalising euthanasia and assisted suicide. He admitted assisting the deaths of 133 terminally ill people between 1990 and 1998 with his Thanatron, a suicide machine. He then released a film of him administering a lethal injection to a terminally ill patient and dared the authorities to arrest him, which they duly did.
Well, Kevorkian not only broke the law, he told the authorities he'd broken the law, and he said, in case of any doubt, here's a video of me breaking the law. And the reason he did this, of course, was to get himself arrested, to bring publicity to his case, to generate an impetus for changing a law that he felt was unjust. And this is a classic example of Durkheim's argument that we can use crime and punishment as a means of social reform.
So Durkheim argued that crime could function to reaffirm social boundaries and bring about reform. But he also identified a third function of crime. It can draw people together and strengthen social cohesion.
Well, Durkheim said in a very famous phrase, crime brings together upright consciences and concentrates them. And what he meant by this was that although there are different values in modern societies, there are certain core or fundamental values that everyone believes in. And when crimes breach these fundamental values, they bring about a great deal of moral anger and indignation, and at the same time strengthen these values. And a good example of this would be horrible crimes against children.
One such case, one of the worst in British criminal history, began at the Strand shopping centre in Liverpool in February 1993. Two 10-year-old boys, Robert Thompson and John Venables, kidnapped James Bolger, a 2-year-old toddler. They walked him through the streets for 2 hours before taking him up a railway embankment. There they tortured him before finally killing him and leaving his body on the railway line in the hope that people would think it was an accident. The case horrified the nation.
When you get a really horrible case like the killing of James Bolger or more recently the killing of Baby P, this produces an almost universal and instant reaction of outrage, anger, despair, frustration, and a feeling that something should be done about this. And this is fundamental. This isn't a few people thinking this. It's not the media whipping people up. It's a very natural gut reaction amongst most people. And this is an example of what Durkheim would call the collective consciousness, something that nearly everyone believes in. In this case, you don't harm children. You look after them and protect them. But sometimes this moral anger, this concentration of social values can bring about social change, because sometimes there's an inquiry, some sort of reforms are initiated with the idea of trying to make things a little bit safer for children in the future. So sometimes out of these terrible cases, there can be some good coming from them.
So for Durkheim, as well as disrupting social order, crime can also strengthen it in a number of ways. He even went as far as suggesting that a degree of rule-breaking is essential for the maintenance of social order. What Durkheim's ideas teach us is that a sociological approach to crime has to go beyond crime and criminals and take into account the reaction to crime and its effects. And this is one of his most important legacies to sociology. So do you find Durkheim's ideas about crime and order convincing? If so, why? And if not, why not? Can you think of some more examples? And what later perspectives in the sociology of crime and deviance were influenced by Durkheim's view?